They don't show up on time because they have to. They show up on time, Glenn, because they want to. They don't want to let their team down. They get up in the morning and they don't dread work. And this is all part of what we're trying to do.
Hey there, everybody. It's me, Dr. Glenn Krieger, here with another episode of the Orthopreneurs Podcast. Today, we have a two-time returning champion. He's won twice now. He's amassed $45,000 in winnings. Mr. Paul Edwards. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Glenn. I didn't know I had that much in winnings. I'm pretty excited to get that check at the end of this podcast here.
You got the double Jeopardy question right last time. So as you may recall, this is Paul's second time on the podcast. He is the president and founder of CEDR Solutions, and we'll get into more of that in just a little bit. And as time goes on, if you spend enough time with Paul, you'll recognize that he really has this really cool, relaxed, chill, sort of the dude vibe going on here. And so whenever I'm around him, if this seems like a more chill, relaxed kind of podcast interview, I'm going to be, if you've seen The Big Lebowski, I feel more like Donnie around Paul, because he's the dude.
Glenn, right? you are chill and relaxed is not words that I think people normally use around you, but okay.
No, we're all good here. You see, I'm just relaxed. The universe is talking to me today, Paul.
Nice.
And so those of you who listened in our last podcast, probably about a year ago or so, if you haven't, you should totally go listen to it. It was that'll become a historic podcast, Paul, because that was done during the height of COVID.
Yeah.
Right? Where like 50 years from now, when my kids ask me, or some young dentist or orthodontist asks, and by the way, I'm 54. So when I say 50 years from now, I'm being really, really generous with my health. But when someone asks me, 20 years from 30 years from now, what was it like to practice through COVID? I honestly think that we'll be able to go back to your podcast episode, because we covered so much ground that was germane to what we were doing during COVID that will, in some ways, will sound absolutely ridiculous, and in others, but some of it actually may be sticking with us as changes to the whole entire employment world after COVID.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
I was thinking this morning, I was working at a common desk, one of these WeWorks kind of places.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea, and I was speaking to somebody I know who is in LA, and he was telling me about how a lot of the law firms, they don't need buildings anymore, right? Yeah. They just need meeting rooms. Mm-hmm. And so people can do all their legal briefs and what have you from home. And, I think that's going to be a legacy, being that those who don't know you well enough, or don't know much about you, don't realize that you're like in the heart of employment, right? And it's interesting to see how employment demographics and shifts have changed, perhaps permanently, where people realized that, wait a minute, we were able to keep the business just as productive with way less cost with Susie working from home, as opposed to, us having 100 people come into an office space,
right,
and have to work. And it's really interesting to me at these common desks, these WeWorks, at how incredibly packed they are. There's a company that was working across from me, and I said to the guy, "Who are these people?" There's like 8 people. They've got like all computers open, working in a permanent space within these WeWorks. He said, "Oh, they're a real estate company. They're commercial real estate. They just work from here." Do you see that as being a permanent shift, or do you still think people are living in the COVID times, and that the vast majority of people are working from home? And I know you have no way of knowing for sure, but I'm just curious your take on this. Are people coming back into the main space, or is the main space kind of dying forever?
Well, I've got 45 employees, and so I've got some impact on this. And we've got a building here in Tucson, and even though we're in service, we're not face forward service. So most of your listeners are face forward. They have to be present to provide the service they provide. For us, the whole world has changed, Glenn. If you had asked me 3 years ago, could we hire as many people outside of Tucson and not train them here as a part of a core team? And would it work? And could we get our culture instilled in them and all those things, the training, everything that goes on, which is pretty heavy duty for us? I would have told you no. I did say no. We always tried to source as locally as possible. You could, without going into it too deep, Glenn, you could work here for a year, and then if you needed to leave and wanted to move to someplace else, you could continue to work for us if you held that kind of position here. But we've completely changed that. And I'm sitting in a building right now with 3, maybe 4 people out of those 45. And
Wow.
During the week, there will never be more than 12 in here at any given time. And it's going really well. And there are some things that changed. I mean, I could go down that rabbit hole, but I think there's some things that have changed in your industry as well. And in the industries that we serve. So even though you can't say to your people, well, you can work from home. I mean, you can't send in a dental practice, you can't send a hygienist home. You can't do the work that you do, Glenn, from the house. You got to be there with the patient. So,
but my call center can be wherever, right? Because I have a call center. They can be anywhere I want. My financial coordinator can be anywhere they want.
They could be.
My TC needs to be in the office typically. It's hard to have somebody come in and be presented to remotely.
Right.
Though I suspect there's somebody out there doing that.
Yeah. There are actually people doing that already. So, well, point being, things have changed all the way across the board.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting also how I'll be the first to tell you, before COVID, I could not stand video meetings. I could not.
No one did.
I could not stand. And now it's just like someone wants to have a phone call with me. I'm like, well, let's just Zoom. I'd much rather see your face when I talk to you than do it over a voice. And it's just interesting that way. But we could sit here and talk demographic trends forever. We could talk strategic planning, which I know is a passion of yours.
Yeah.
But let's jump in a little bit to employment, and let's just start with COVID. Let's hope, as of the zooming of this one, is hopefully on the wane. I think I saw in Texas yesterday there were like 1,100 COVID cases, which is we're starting to get down to real low numbers again. Our practices, the calls you're getting at CEDR, are you seeing a lot less COVID related and going back to kind of standard normal employment questions? And if so, what are you hearing a lot of?
Well, yeah, we're still getting plenty of COVID calls, and those are typically the standard call. Someone's got COVID, or whatever that looks like. We're getting far fewer of them. Obviously, this thing where people called it the Great Resignation, which we've really recoined that. It's more of a job hop. That's a leading edge issue right now. We're getting a lot of calls about how to do something about having people leaving your practice, or trying to hire other people to come in and they don't even show up.
Right.
It's all about sourcing employees right now. And then interspersed in all of that, or all of the other issues are coming back. Maternity leave. What do I do when someone needs to go on maternity leave? What's my obligation there? Making accommodations in the workplace, people not getting along, people not showing up on time, people not doing their job, all the regular stuff that we all experienced is starting to come back together. And I think that might be one of the drawbacks to putting everybody in the room.
I know. It's interesting.
Together again.
Yeah. It's my daughter's boyfriend has not a practice. He works in financial technology, fintech. Right. And he said one of the things he really misses the most is that he's not in a room with his coworkers.
Yeah.
Like, he goes to a common desk, WeWorks kind of place, shows up there.
Right.
But he goes and he doesn't see the same people every day. And so I said to him that what we need, because you talked about people coming back together, I said, why not develop a WeWork or a common desk or an app that allows people who work totally different jobs to work in a space together?
Oh, I love that idea.
Right?
Man.
So that
you need to build that. You need to stop what you're doing. We'll just
I'll see. I'm going by.
Yeah.
I'll see you, Paul.
Yeah. Good job, Glenn. Great idea.
Yeah. No, but like, think about the idea of creating something where, so you're an attorney, but you don't like working at home. And you don't like going to a place where that guy across from you is going to be really rude and talking on the phone, and you don't know who you're going to have tomorrow.
Yeah.
But you show up and suddenly there's 20 other people in your pod, if you will. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, Paul, good to see you. Hey, how's the real estate business going? Things good?
Yeah.
Hey, so you don't care that you're not working with people on the same team. You just care that you're seeing the same people. Yeah. You can go out to the bar afterwards, after work, and you're still working 8 to 5 together. You're just not working on the same team. And he was like, you know what? That would actually work really well, because we all just want to belong to something. And
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. But yeah, you said it best. People coming back to work and all these things are happening. So I've experienced personally
Hmm.
the whole interview process. Someone sounds great on a Zoom or on a phone and then don't even show up. They ghost you on the interview, or they
Right.
do show up worse, as you and I had talked about earlier. They show up for the interview and you hire them. And, like we always tell interviewees at the new hire, what Cole Johnson once said at one of the summits. He said, look, hey, Paul, great to meet you. Love your resume. You want to work here? Here's what we'll pay. Here are the benefits. And I just got to tell you, Paul, you showed up today. Your hair is combed. You're wearing a nice outfit. You're groomed. Everything looks great. This is the Paul we expect every single day.
Right.
This is the guy. This is the guy we're hiring. And this is the guy we expect on day 5, on day 50, on day 600. This is the person. Is that going to be a problem, Paul? And you say, no, not at all. And so the hardest thing we used to have is getting great people and keeping them there. Now, I hire people on the interview who are great, Paul, and then they don't even show up on the first day, or they show up the first day 30 minutes late. You have the conversation with them. 3 days later, they missed a day because they're sick, and or they just don't show up at all. And I have a feeling that you've got more insight on this topic than I do.
Well, it's happening, and I think it happens even when you do what I consider to be a really good job of interviewing and kind of going through the process of behavioral interviewing and picking the right person. So I don't want to imply that people who have that happen to them are doing anything wrong. But we're entrepreneurs, we are owners of businesses. And anytime something happens to us once, that can be an anomaly. But when it starts happening over and over again, or we're hearing it from our fellow employers out there that, hey, someone ghosted me too, then we start to look for why that's occurring, right? We look for just for the why. And I have some thoughts there. I think that, certainly in the past, you could get lucky and hire what I'll call a warm body, and they would show up and they would be a warm body, and you might get lucky. They might turn into a good employee. I believe that if you're not super intentional now during your hiring process, and that's a larger conversation we can talk about a little bit, but I believe you're not super intentional in who you hire and why you hired them and why they're going to come to work for you and where they came from, you're going to end up with more of these situations and less success in the short run.
I agree.
I agree. It's kind of like, here's, if you're not communicating why you exist, why your company, your practice exists, then you're not going to get the right people. That's my view.
It's interesting because how many times have we gone out and been told, and I still do it, give out cards. Hey, thanks for exceptional service. Would you like to have a job where you don't have to be on your feet all day serving?
Of course.
And then they're great. They're smile forward. They're happy. They're upbeat. And then if you're in a small town America, I do think there's a different dynamic between the young lady or the young man who works at, Dairy Queen, just to drop a name, works at Dairy Queen, and there's a town of 7,000 people. And it doesn't really matter to them if they work at Dairy Queen or if they work at Dr. Krieger's office or wherever they work. But it's interesting in the big cities where there's tons and tons of employment opportunity. These people will show up for work, smile forward, everything's great. And within a week, they say, this is not for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I didn't realize I thought this was just customer service, or I didn't realize how hard this job is. Mm-hmm. And that certainly sways people away from it a great deal. But talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about intentional hiring. I'm curious to hear a little bit more because you mentioned that. And I'm curious to hear your take on that.
The more intentional your hiring process is, the better results you're going to get. So, Glenn, I'm just going to give you an example of something that we do intentionally here at CEDR. Sure. I think this is the best way for me to explain what I mean by intentional hiring. You can imagine that one of the main jobs here is you're a solution center advisor. You're an HR expert. That means that you're holding you're either holding a law degree, or you're holding some advanced, maybe an MBA, or you have a level of experience where maybe you worked at Target for 12 years and worked your way up through HR, and we stole you from Target. I have former investigators from state agencies, wage and hour agencies on the team. We're looking for those kinds of expertise. But you can imagine that with the number of members that we have, and it's over 2,500 members, they get to hear the same questions over and over and over again. They have to keep answering them. And one of our core values is we have to meet the member. So Glenn, if you call in, we got to meet you where you're at in your HR journey. So if you've just started your practice and never managed people, we probably need to have a different conversation with you than when you've been at it for 30 years and you've dealt with this and you're just looking for some help. Right. So one of the intentional things we do in the hiring process in the Solution Center is those folks get interviewed by 3 different people. And we keep asking a few of the same technical questions over and over and over again. And what we find is that if they get frustrated, and we've actually had a couple do it, we'd say, you look a little frustrated. And they'd say, I'm getting tired of answering this question. You asked me this question, and then the other person asked me this. I feel like I've answered it over and over and over again. And automatically, intentionally, we know they're never going to survive as a Solution Center member. Because they can't be annoyed by having to answer the same question. If what they want is something new and different every day, we can provide that in a different way, in training and in expanding on their experiences. We can do it in something that both is professionally good for them and for us. But the job is to answer the damn question, answer it well, answer it compassionately and within our core values. So you can do that in your practice. So if someone comes in and says, wow, there's a lot of technical need here, and I've got to work between 3 programs, and this is a multitasking position, and I hate multitasking, then you screwed up when you put them into that position. You assumed that if they were 27 years old, they were great with technology and weren't going to be annoyed by it. I don't really like people. I don't like people, and I particularly don't like people who are whining, and your patients are pretty whiny. I'm out of here. I didn't realize that I was going to be held so accountable. I thought that I could be 10 minutes late to work. I didn't realize that when I'm 10 minutes late, I throw the whole thing off. I mean, I can't be here at 8. Are you kidding me? Do you know what's going on out there in the world? There's traffic and I hope, I'm being a little facetious, Glenn, but
not really.
I'm pointing out the things, and I can't do this for you. I can just tell you how to think about it and what to look at. And to every time a hire fails, look at yourself. Look at how you hired them, what you said to them, and what you put them through to get them there. Yeah. There in the chair in your business doing whatever the job is.
Yeah. And I've heard all of those, by the way.
You have. I know.
My favorite is during an interview and someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a people person. I love people.
I love those people.
I love working with people.
Yeah,
that's my
children,
joy.
Man, children are my favorite. Yeah,
I love work. It's like a public broadcasting, right? Like an NPR radio kind of interview. Yeah. I love working with kids.
Exactly. Well, you're asking a question. You're not asking, do you like to work with kids and looking for a yes or no? You're asking a question about, tell me a time when you've had to actually work with a child that's been difficult.
Right. Like, tell me your success working with kids.
Yeah. Tell me your success in working with kids. And sometimes it's just going to be, I've got like 27 nieces and nephews, and I've been babysitting them since I was 12. I think that can be a good answer.
Oh yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what if my practice doesn't have kids? Right. I remember sitting with I forget who it was. There's so many doctors who now that I'm getting old, I recognize the value of experience and that there's just no shortcut. And I used to sit with a lot of older docs, much more experienced docs when I was younger, and ask a million questions. And I remember one of them said that when someone was on the phone, if they ask you the question, do you guys treat kids? It doesn't mean that they have a kid. Sometimes it could mean you say, yeah, we do. We treat a lot of kids. As a matter of fact, we're 90% kids. Your answer could have been like, oh, okay. Well, I really didn't want to go to a place that had kids because I don't like kids, right? You never know. So the answer back is, why do you ask, right?
That's a behavioral interview question. Exactly. Tell me more about why you asked me that question.
Yeah, just simply, yeah. Oh, sure. Before I answer, why do you ask? Oh, because I have a 5-year-old. Oh, yeah, we treat a ton of kids.
Yeah.
Why? Because I hate kids. Oh, we don't treat any kids.
We don't treat any kids. We have a separate entrance.
We have a total separate entrance. You'll never see a child the whole time you're here. We put a mask over your head, a bag. So we could do this all day long, but let's jump into something that I know is a passion of yours, which is the one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
Something that CEDR has written about, that you've written about. You have some great stuff out there. And I will ask you, and if I have your permission to share your resource on one-on-ones that I read, I don't know if I'm allowed to attach it to this podcast when it's over, to allow people the opportunity to see that best practices for a one-on-one.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So before we dive into that, talk a little bit about, because we just talked about the interview process, right? Bringing people in. And so let's go on the notion that you found that great person, you love them, maybe they're a diamond in the rough, maybe they need a little bit of work, but you got that person in, they're not just a warm body, they're actually useful. Now, how do we keep them from jumping ship? How do we keep them from hopping to the next job, which really is the nature of a lot of today's workforce, is not to work for you for 20 years. They want to experience different jobs, different places, and what have you. So talk a little bit about some of the best ways to do that and the role the one-on-one plays there.
Okay, so one-on-ones are something that we're trying to, okay, so again, Glenn, my job is a lot of times to expose our members to a subject and get you going and give you enough that if it inspires you, or if you feel like it's something that might work for you, or more importantly, work for you and your managers, that you begin to delve into it deeper and deeper. I believe that one-on-ones are an important tool that aren't being used enough within small to medium-sized businesses, in particular, within the practices that we work with. We did a poll. We got back about, right now, I think it's about 650 respondents have come back to give us some answers to the poll, which is simply, do you do one-on-ones? By the way, everyone, a one-on-one is defined as a regular meeting between you and an employee for approximately 20 minutes. And I can speak a little bit more to what you do in those meetings in a second. But you do them regularly. In best case scenario, maybe best case, they're weekly, or every other week, or at the most a month. And the only problem I have with a month, Glenn, is a one-on-one is an opportunity to get course corrections and feedback from one another. And a month is kind of a long time to go between course corrections. You can really you could even end up being kind of pissed because you didn't get to have a conversation with somebody that you probably should have had with them sooner, and you were saving it.
And may I ask you, while you're talking about one-on-ones, where do check-ins work? Well, in all of this,
a check-in and a one-on-one are basically the same.
Well, I mean to say is, Paul is working for me. We're going to do our one-on-one once every 2 weeks, let's say, because I've got a lot of team members, and it's a lot of work for me to do these one-on-ones, and I'm not able to do it every week, but I'm going to do it in 2 weeks. And I just saw Paul do something that doesn't make me very happy. So my friend Joe Hirsch, who wrote the book, The Feedback Fix, he was on one of the earlier podcasts as well. He talks about the importance of a check-in as well. Are you a fan of the check-in with, hey, Paul, do you have a sec? I just wanted to chat with you. So you can address something in its moment rather than wait until 2 days, 3 days, 5 days later. And hopefully make
as long as the check-in follows kind of the same process as a one-on-one, because I don't want the one-on-one to feel more cumbersome than a check-in. The check-in needs to work as both a correction and a celebration. So you hear me say that a lot. Your job is to remove barriers from in front of your team. And you also, I know, and it's uncomfortable to think of me this way, but I'm a cheerleader. I've got a little skirt on, and my job is to, I'm not wearing the little skirt. I swear, Glenn. I was the first, amongst the first 3 male cheerleaders in the county that I went to high school in. So I had a choice of whether or not I would ride the bus with the band, because I was a band nerd, or ride the bus with the cheerleaders. And well, Glenn, you know which direction I went in for that one.
Yeah, but did they have a skirt in your size?
No, they did. They had the, I got to wear the cool sweatpants. But anyway, look, so your job in engaging and doing a check-in is to make course corrections and to cheerlead. So one course correction could be, hey, I noticed you were late again today. Look, you got to get in here at 8. 8:10's not working for us. Is everything okay? Can you do it? Yes, I can do it. Now it's Friday and they've had 3 days in a row. They've been in at 5 minutes to 8 and the check-in is, hey, thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. And a lot of people think, well, I don't need to celebrate you actually just doing your job and doing what you're supposed to do. But what else are you going to celebrate? I mean, so yes, I'm a big fan of check-ins. I don't want things to foster. I think that once you hit a stride on a one-on-one, the number of corrections and check-ins that you have to have are going to diminish greatly.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, this generation, Gen Z, needs that affirmation of thank you for showing up to work.
It's fine.
It's totally different than Gen X or even millennials. It was funny, if you've been in the workplace long enough, right? You've seen the baby boomer generation, the greatest generation. You've seen everything. Like when I started in 1980s working in my dad's practice, there were World War II veterans who were in the workplace.
That's right.
That point. And to see it sort of watered down and the difference that each generation is needed. I know that you had the greatest generation, and then I think baby boomers came after. I might be missing something, but I think baby boomers and then Gen X and Gen Y, which is millennials. Yeah. But I remember when millennials entered the workforce, all these books, Why Size Your Practice, all these books came out. And we're like, oh my God, how are we going to deal with millennials? And then all of a sudden Gen Z came along. And you're like, millennials are amazing. Like they'll actually work for a while and stay. And it really is interesting. I hate stereotypes, but there was a great comedian who once said that all stereotypes are based in some form of truth.
I guess, yeah.
And it really is interesting to see Gen Z who could use that affirmation. And then again, who doesn't like being told how well they're doing something, even if it is, hey, I just wanted to say to you, it's such a load off my mind that you're here every day on time or early. It's just one less thing for me to worry about. And I just want to say thank you.
I overheard you handling that call and I could tell that they weren't being exactly kind to you. I really appreciate that you held the space for the practice, that you held your temper. I'm listening. I know that wasn't an easy thing to happen.
Yeah.
So-and-so is coming in. And you know how difficult they are because, who has 16 children, but they're bringing them all in at one time. You did such an amazing job with them last time. We're sticking you with that job again. Would you please handle that? These are all affirmations. These are all recognizing somebody's strengths and how they're helping you get to your purpose, your goals, every team should be up to something. Every business should have some short and long-term missions going on. Yeah. And these kinds of feedback, the kinds you described before and the one-on-ones, are the method for getting to the goal, for accomplishing something, for growing the practice. I mean, one of the biggest complaints, Glenn, is how am I going to afford to be able to pay people more money? How is that going to come about? And the answer to that is you're either going to have to raise your prices or do more business. And how do you do that without your team involved? You can't just jack prices and you can't just ask for more business. It takes everybody working together to get there. So again, I think one-on-ones can help you get there.
Yeah. And like you said, you need to make them regular, be consistent with them. And as I think you've already sort of inferred here, you're going to focus on the team member, right? Themselves. Let them, that's one of the most valuable lessons is let them do all the talking, right?
If you can. Yeah. I remember, if you learn that, this is one of the things you'll learn from us during interviews is just shut up. Just shut up. Just ask the questions you need to ask and let the other person talk. And you'll learn a lot. Now, in a one-on-one, brief description of a one-on-one is it's a look back. So let's just say we've done 6 one-on-ones every couple of weeks. All right. So I've been with you for 6 times and it's generally progressing through the one-on-ones. Each time we meet, we talk about we meet and say, how's it going? What's going on with you? And you tell me that, your sous vide skills are getting better, but you're having trouble getting flavor. And I explain to you.
This is a conversation I had with Paul earlier.
We've been having one-on-ones and I tell you how to get a little more flavor using the sous vide and what you can and can't do with it. And there's our present conversation. Doesn't have anything to do with work. And then we reflect back on what we talked about last week and we look at barriers and we look at a little bit of cheerleading, right? We're just like, hey, last week we talked about, so-and-so who you work with got these codes wrong. We build that the wrong way. It ended up causing a bunch of phone calls in here from upset patients. And you go through that issue and you talk about how it got corrected. Is it still ongoing? They're giving you feedback, telling you, yeah, I'm working on it, but we've got this problem, whatever that looks like. And then, Glenn, it's like, okay, so for next week, we're going to keep cleaning that up. And I've been thinking this week that we're not hitting our numbers when it comes to internal referrals. What are we going to keep doing about that in your role? And I can give you many examples. I can give you one really good one, Glenn. We had a practice who was having trouble getting the referral. They just weren't hitting the numbers. And, would you mind? Did you like how it happened? They would tell them, I'm going to send you a survey. We'd appreciate it if you'd answer the survey. And in that were, an opportunity for referrals. All of a sudden, the numbers ticked up. So in the one-on-one, the manager says, hey, the numbers went up. We got a lot more replies to the survey, and it looks like we actually got a couple of referrals out of it. Did you do something different? And the front desk person said, I sure did. I quit telling them that we would appreciate it, and I told them that it would mean something to me.
Wow.
It would actually help me do my job better if you would fill this out. It reflects good on me when I get you to do it. So guess what happens? Anybody who gets hired after that employee is going to get taught. Don't you tell them we're sending them a survey. You tell them you're doing it, and you enroll them in, please, would you please fill out the survey? And that's a one-on-one. And it resulted in probably, who knows how much more business for the practice. One little change.
It's amazing. And you hit on something there that's worth just exploring for a second. As I mentioned, Joe Hirsch, who wrote The Feedback Fix, great book. It's a great podcast. I think at around minute 12 or 13 of that podcast, he drops some absolute pure gold on how to meet with employees. Because that's his thing, is just how to give feedback. Yeah. Or as he calls it, feed forward. Yeah. Right. And so he says, instead of giving a crap sandwich, which is which we've all experienced, right? Yep. Your kid, you go to your teacher night with your kid at school, and what does the teacher say? I got to tell you, little Paul is the most amazing. His creativity is off the charts, but I have to tell you, he's been peeing all over the floor and beating up kids. Yeah. But I'm sure we'll work through it because he's such a great kid, and I really appreciate you. And he calls it a crap sandwich because you started with crap, you finished with crap, and you squeeze something in the middle of it. Right. And so, or praise sandwich, right? It's got crap in the middle and praise on the outsides. Yep. And he talks about doing a WRAP, a WRAP, which is, state, what happened or is happening, describe why this needs attention, and then explore it with I emotions, like I feel, I know, and then shift. And this is the key. Instead of shifting blame, do exactly what you said, which is ask them to be proactive and part of the solution. So it's kind of like, hey, when people call, it's really important, Paul, that we get this information filled out, because if we don't get it filled out, the office doesn't get the information it needs. And then I feel as if the patients just don't start treatment quite as effectively. And so what steps do you think you can do here to help get this? Instead of saying you haven't been getting it, you haven't been doing what I've asked, he just brings them exactly like you said. And it was some of the most valuable advice that I ever got. I can't say I always follow it the way I should. But during one-on-ones, this would be a great opportunity to create that wrap, so to speak. Yep. Fact, we call it the FIRR method. Ours is the FIRR method, and it's, basically fact, impact, request, and the result that you're looking for. So can you help me out? Can you make sure that you do this? And the result we're looking for is that the notes are always there for me, or the patient's never asking me about how much it's going to cost because you've already, that's already been taken care of, or whatever that looks like. But facts are important. But I do want to stress something, and you called it the poop sandwich. It's very important in these one-on-ones that they are not for complaining. So that's one of the misconceptions, and it's what happens, by the way. I think it was George Carlin that said, "You follow an ugly kid home, ugly parents will open the door." If you get in a meeting with a negative person, they're going to be prone to negative conversation. Right. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is hard sometimes. But the role of the one-on-one, the goal is you don't want to be in negative conversation about everything they've done wrong. You don't want to be micromanaging them in any way. And you don't want them to be able to stay in their negative conversation. Like, why are we having trouble here? And they start blaming other people. Right. That's a real challenge.
And honestly, Glenn, if that's who you're working with and who's on your team, then you might need to be thinking about some other things about right fit for that
Yeah,
employee.
exactly.
Yeah.
So my last question for you is, you're talking about one-on-ones. We do them once a week, let's say, or once every 2 weeks. We've had these great conversations. Where am I keeping notes on this? What is a best practices for keeping notes? Because I'm going to have to take notes.
Yep.
I'm going to have to be able to reference these things back again later. What's your suggestion for this?
I suggest that you open up a Google Doc and you just have a running conversation in your Google Doc with your employee, and you make a few notes, and afterwards, and it's one of the hardest things to do. You put a few notes in there, of your impression of what's going on. Glenn, this is important because in a very real way, as an HR person, I need to have some documentation of what's going on. And so I can have corrective actions written, and I can tell you what, this is your issue and this is what you got to do. And I can do those. And there's still a place for corrective actions in all of this, both to have impact and to protect our rear ends. But these notes that you're taking are extraneous, and they are notes that you can sit in a hearing with and refer to. Right. And you cannot use them if they do not exist. They can also be presented as part of the record. And it's because they are part of the record. And it does go back to, it's an interesting concept that you, attorney, and my ex-employee came up with about why I fired this employee ultimately. But I have 6 months of one-on-one notes here where we discuss the issues that I cited in the termination letter that were still ongoing. And by the way, here are her 74 correction requests to me on her timekeeping, because she was always coming in late. Take you down a rabbit hole. You still got to document what you're doing. And
right.
Glenn, I don't know about you, but I'm so busy. And if I'm doing one-on-ones with 7 people, I need some notes.
I do too, man.
I need some notes from last week.
The more white hair I get, the more notes I need.
The more notes I need.
But by the way, if I'm doing these notes and I'm keeping them in Google Drive, since you're my legal employment expert, I mean, do I just put them in a Google Doc? I mean, anybody can access that.
No, they can't. If you don't invite them to the document, nobody can access it but you.
So if my computer's open and someone opens it, obviously, but what's my standard here? I am not the dude who worries about the federal government, although that's why I have you in my life. Do I have to be really worried about somebody accessing these notes, or do I have to take any special precautions? Can I email them through regular mail, or do I have to do the HIPAA compliant level encrypting?
No, depending on what's in the notes. So if you use our HR Vault, which is kind of it's designed to mimic what a file folder looks like in your office. Mm-hmm. As far as its function, there's 2 folders for employees. There's one that is, so I want to say, somewhat public. I don't mean public to the public, but if the employee requests it or the employee is looking in it, they know what's in that file. There's corrective actions in it. There's anything that they've given to you. Maybe they passed you a doctor's note when they made a request for some accommodation during maternity leave or something. But you may there's another folder for things that aren't open to everybody else at the business. Let me put that a better way. You've got 2 managers. One manager may need to know that an employee has some kind of a medical condition in order for them to manage that employee. The other manager doesn't need to know about that. It's none of their business. And so that's what that second folder is for. It's more top secret, more isolated. So it depends, depending on the nature of what it is that goes on in a one-on-one. If you and the employer are talking and they reveal to you that they're undergoing psychiatric care, if they're having some trouble at home, or they have some domestic abuse going on, or they're dealing with something, which is completely possible. These are things that you have to keep close to the breast and not only need to be there on a need to know basis. Now, if it's you and you manage your practice, then you're the need to know. Right. You have everything.
Right.
I hope that helped a little bit. It
does.
Important to document. That's why we provide a form in the article, and we provide it to everybody. You need to use some kind of documentation to do this. And there's a stride you have to hit. And I'll tell you how we do them in the article, or I'll describe them. I gave you the form, which gives you some guidance, but ultimately different businesses and managers conduct one-on-ones different ways, slightly different ways.
Okay.
It just is what it is.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And like I said, I'm going to make sure that in the podcast, when it gets uploaded on YouTube, that we have the link for that article underneath, so anybody wants to see it. And before we go, my question for you is, if someone wanted to get a hold of you for an HR question or to engage CEDR, how would they reach you?
There's two ways that you can engage with us or learn something about us. You can go, if you're on Facebook, you go to and join our Facebook group called HR Basecamp. You have to be an owner or a manager to be able to get in. We'll vet you a little bit. You apply to get in the group. You'll get in within 24 hours. There's 10,000 of your peers in there, as well as some of my HR experts, and we're trying to answer questions as best we can, given the general knowledge that we have about your particular situation. And there are great answers being provided by other members in the group who are, just wonderful at helping one another. It's a very supportive community. It's all positive, no politics, no BS. We keep it fun. Yeah. On the other side of that, you can always go to our website at CEDR, CEDR Solutions.com, and you can get in contact with us. You can also sign up there for a bunch of free education. When you form fill, a salesperson doesn't call you from CEDR. We that model's dead, Glenn. We're we want to provide education. Even when you become a member and we're helping you solve problems one-on-one, you're a better client if we make you smarter, if we make you better at being a manager. Our purpose statements is better workplaces make better lives. And that should ring a bell. If we can make your workplace a little better for you and better for your employees through you and through your managers, then you're going to have better lives in general. And that is a cyclical feedback. That is that feedback loop where upsets occur, but they get cleaned up quicker. People who work together, who enjoy the same purpose and sense of mission and vision, they like coming to work. They don't show up on time because they have to. They show up on time, Glenn, because they want to. They don't want to let their team down. They get up in the morning and they don't dread work. And this is all part of what we're trying to do. So if you sign up for the education, you're going to get a lot of that kind of, I'll use the word altruistic, Glenn. There's a lot of training in there to try to become a better manager and protect your practice and be able to comply with employment law. And
I know you've helped us a lot.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. And and again, during COVID, I will never forget something happened one day on a federal level. I don't remember what it was. Like, something happened every day on a federal level.
There was a lot happening on the federal level.
But there was one day in particular where I called a couple of HR companies because everybody in Orthopreneurs RD, everybody was coming at me. Glenn, do you know what's going on with this? Do you know what's going on with that? Like, I suddenly knew all the answers. And I remember calling, and it was almost like, they had a phone in one hand, and they're like, I'm on the phone with my expert in Washington right now. I'm going to call you back in 2 minutes. It was boom on the other. And during that time, which I think hopefully many of us will forget the details of, you and CEDR were so incredibly helpful in guiding people through, particularly when the whole family medical leave, not the regular Family Medical Leave Act, but when all the things came in after that. What happens if my employee tests positive? What happens if they're sick? What happens if their son or daughter needs care? Like, every contingent, which quite honestly either should have been there for every single other illness before that, right? Like, the flu is really no different than COVID in the vast majority of people who got COVID, right? You're home for 5-6 days, whatever. You're still contagious. But it's interesting that those days, CEDR was a guiding light for many of us. And for that, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you helped me sleep a whole lot better at night at a time when many were not sleeping well.
Well, you were all certainly welcome. And that purpose statement was in place. And that purpose statement that you heard from me served us. That was what we needed to do at that point, was focus all of our, our compliance team, our group of attorneys. We just focused on it and started giving answers to the questions that were coming in. It was just, for us, it's like there's no such thing as an HR emergency, but all of a sudden there was an HR emergency. We got pretty excited about that, Glenn, because we were like, it's here. It happened.
It did. So, and we got through it and we survived. And
we're all okay.
Yeah, we're all okay. Yeah. And again, I want to say thank you again, not for just that, but for your time today.
It's a pleasure.
And everybody can appreciate it. One more time, HR Basecamp on Facebook, free $99 Doesn't cost a thing.
Nope. It's free.
And I've been there, and it's great. And certainly CEDRsolutions.com.
Yeah.
If they want to get a hold of you personally or learn more information about the company.
Yeah.
And again, I've had a really great experience, as have many out there. And so thank you again for everything you've done, and thank you for today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Until you're the 3-time returning champion, Paul. Until then, we'll just talk about briskets.
Okay. I'm good. I'm good with that.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Glenn.